There we're going to start with Rabbi Katz, who's going to be sharing with us. He's going to talk primarily about Tov Chav Beis, but he'll also mention the earlier years a little bit more also, and then the Chavs, and then we'll continue with the Lameds, and then Rabbi Minkowitz is going to share with us also something special about Pesach with the Rebbe. So without further ado, Harav Rav Zev Katz.
Good Yontef, everybody. Yontef. Mendy, thank you so much for this beautiful introduction. So, interesting. The first Verbringen, which the Rebbe verbringt for Yud Alef Nissan, was Yud Alef Nissan, Tov Shin Yud Beis. It was not a Verbringen. The Rebbe said a Maimer, the Yankel Katz, in his room, and the Rebbe gave out, prior to that, a list of people that will be called for the Maimer. It was a selected group of people that went into the Rebbe and heard the Maimer. Years later, there was no Verbringen on Yud Alef Nissan until Tov Shin Chav Beis, which that was the Shnas HaShishim. Rebbe walked into the Verbringen, holding at that time the first volume of Likutei Sichos was printed, and the Rebbe came in holding the first volume of Likutei Sichos, and together with it also a Maimer which begins Achemois, a Maimer of the Rebbe Shmaseden, Rebbe Rashab, and this was in front of the Rebbe for the entire Verbringen. In that Verbringen, there was also something very special, which is very, very rare, that the Rebbe said two Mamorim in that Verbringen. One Maimer that began with Achemois, and another Maimer, Godel Oina Omen Yosem Amevorich. Amol gehört Sidim sagen, that why did the Rebbe say a Maimer Godel Oina Omen Yosem Amevorich at that Verbringen? This was a response to the Chassidim, who at that time was still behind the Iron Curtain, and there was no communication of mail or any other types of communications, phones, Vaad nicht, and the Rebbe responded to them publicly at a Maimer by saying a Maimer, Godel Oina Omen Yosem Amevorich. Very interesting. And many, many years later, when the Rebbe was sending Bacharim Shluchim to Australia, to Melbourne, Australia. We have here Rabbi Minkowitz. He was there to be one of the Shluchim, and I'm sure he'll fill us in with many, many more interesting details. But in one of the years, Reb Chaim Gutnik, Olav Hasholem, who was involved in the Anhola of the yeshiva in Melbourne, asked the Rebbe that the Bacharim should leave here before Yud Alef Nissan and arrive to Australia before Pesach. And the Rebbe writes back to him, the Rebbe did not accept it. The Rebbe writes back to him, what does he see, a reason and a geschmack to leave here before Yud Alef Nissan? So by the Rebbe, given ungenommen mit Apashtos, as Yud Alef Nissan darf man sein da. Even though we know that the Rebbe always would answer, and many, many answers printed, that Pesach is a yontev what one has to celebrate with his family and be home. But the Rebbe teaches us as a nishkin stira, it's no contradiction. You'll be home for Pesach on time. But at the same time, where do we belong? Yud Alef Nissan. Yud Alef Nissan belongs to the Daled Amis. From Yud Alef Nissan, we step into Pesach. Could sit and talk for hours and hours describing many angles of what happened here Pesach. First of all, we have the Rebbe's Haggadah. In Tov Shin Vav, the Rebbe gave out his first chibur. The Avis Ayim came out before, but something. And the Rebbe came out with a pirush on Haggadah, and we know how this pirush hat aufgestürmt der Welt. There's a phenomenal article written by Rav Zevin on the greatness of the Rebbe's, nicht was mit darf haben, Haskomis, or the expressions on the greatness, but the fact is that the Rebbe's Haggadah is something fascinating which in the Haggadah world, there's so many Pirushim and Haggadah. Haggadah is probably the only Sefer which was reprinted so many times in Jewish history. But at the same time, this is something out of the ordinary when we're talking about the Rebbe's Haggadah. The Rebbe's Haggadah, in fact, I found this afternoon. This is the edition of Tov Vav, first edition. Second edition came out in Tov Chav Gimel, and it has additions which do not appear in the first Haggadah.
In each one.
Okay, thank you.
Chav Gimel is the Alter Rebbe, so
It was the Shnas HaKam.
yeah.
So in the Hoitzoy of Chav Gimel, there are Hisofis which are printed on the inside of the cover and then on the back of the cover. The Rebbe did not insert it, did not change the format of the Haggadah as it came out in Tov Vav. And when things were added, it was added on the front and on the back. And something which is, I'm sure many of you know it, but it's definitely worthwhile to mention. The Rebbe brings there from a Sicha from the Frierdiker Rebbe, Sichas Chag Pesach Tov Beis, that the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe that when you go to open the door for Eliyahu Novi, Ma'al Pashvoi Chamoscha, so the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe, called him by his name, by his first name, and told him, Nicht tracht Gashmias, tracht Ruchnias, or is it nicht bet Gashmias, bet Ruchnias? And the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe that he should not publicize this, what he's telling him. If we look through the Sichas of Pesach Tov Beis from the Frierdiker Rebbe, it was the Rebbe Shiktach up, so Pesach Tov Beis, you will not find it there. It's nicht da. Say, take the Sefer Sichas Tov Aleph, Tov Beis, which is all in one volume, and you'll turn to the Sichas of Pesach Tov Beis, you will not find the Sicha which relates to this. But, I'm sucht a bissel mehr, in the Rebbe's Rishimis we find it. And it's in the Rishimis, and the Rebbe writes, in the Rishimis, Misichais Chag Pesach Tov Beis. Because the Frierdiker Rebbe told it, said it, but he didn't say it at a Farbrengen. He said it to the Frierdiker Rebbe said it to the Rebbe. And he tells him that when my father told me, when the Rebbe Rashab told it to the Frierdiker Rebbe, he told me that I shouldn't publicize, and I'm telling you the same. Das nicht mehr fassen sein. But the Rebbe loves each one of us, and anything the Rebbe could treat us to, he treats us. So the Rebbe did not keep it as a secret, and the Rebbe revealed it by printing it in the Tov Chav Gimel edition of the Haggadah. It reminds me, it reminds me a famous story which the Rebbe spoke about the Alter Rebbe who Yom Kippur went to help a lady that has just given birth. The Rebbe uses the expression, he went to make a yaichel. A yaichel probably means a soup or some sort of a dish, to make sure that that lady, who everybody was in shul, this was Yom Kippur, everybody was in shul, and nobody thought of going to prepare food for this lonely woman who has just given birth. And it was the Alter Rebbe himself that went to prepare it and make it. And when the Rebbe erzählt uns die Mainzer, the Rebbe says also that this story was obviously kept as a secret, aber mit das mir erzählt, sagt der Rebbe, hat man sicher gewusst, als ich will machen a Trask davon. So, from the Rebbe, anytime he had something which wasn't published and wasn't known, the Rebbe always treated us. And we should use it. It's in the Sinas Koyach of Din in the Meibishten, of Tonem Rebbe Sinyonim, of Tonem, especially when we're talking about it on such a special day as today. I'll run on the Kudde, which relates to the Pesach, but The Rebbe allemal gemon throughout the entire Seder. The Rebbe spoke about it later. There was always a fabring in Tiltrav Shin Lamed. The Rebbe would fabring the second night of Pesach. The Rebbe would always speak about saying the Haggadah loud, saying the Haggadah b'koil rom, and saying the Haggadah b'simcha. B'simcha b'koil rom. I think the Rebbe says steht das in Kisvei Arizal, that that's how it's supposed to be said. By the Rebbe's Tish, on the second floor of 770, there was a Yid that would come every Pesach. His name was Rabbi Yankel Katz, Rabbi Yankel Katz. He lived in Chicago and did not miss, not a Pesach and not a Sukkot by the Rebbe. He was an Erlich Yid in the sense of very, very Tmimistic Yid. Let's say a real Balshemsky Yid. And he would say the Haggadah loud and with him gehert. And like I said, it was a Pashita Yid. So there were many, many mistakes in the Ivra of the Haggadah, and the Olam really used to have a good laugh on it later. Ad kedei kacha had erzählt that there were even times when the Rebbe would smile on certain pronunciations, how he made them in the Haggadah. Anyways, he was the Shliach Tzibur, or whatever word we should use, for saying the Haggadah. And his son Heshi Katz Olav Shalom, it's worth it. And he would ask the Fir Kashas. He would ask the Fir Kashas, actually like he's asking his father, but he said it loud, and everybody listened to him asking the Fir Kashas. He was a Ben Yochid, and he has a sister Marilyn. And his father, like I said, was a very, very Erlich Yid. He had his Hidurim, his Chumres. He wouldn't ride on Yontif. He wouldn't write on Yontif. He wouldn't go into the elevator. On Chalamayt, I'm sorry, Chalamayt, thank you. On Chalamayt, he didn't even use the elevator in 770. In Chalamayt, he didn't use either. He went Zeyara, Yerushalayim Diker Yid. But yes, exactly. Yeah. Emes. Yeah, he would go next door. Interesting, in the very early years of the Rebbe's Messias, a geheißen like the Balabatische Yid in Lubavitch. He took a checkbook, signed the entire checkbook, did not fill in any amount or any date, took this checkbook and sent it into the Rebbe, so that the Rebbe should make the decision what amount to fill into this check. And the Seder given that every Erev Rosh Chodesh, before the Rebbe would go to the oil, would call the Yankel Katz, ask him if he has anything special that the Rebbe wants he should mention at the oil, and at the same time the Rebbe told him the amount which the check is going to be filled out for. He had some sort of a friendship with my father. So every Chalamoid, he would come for a meal to our house. I remember it. After Mincha, like the Mincha would be 3:15, like around 20 to 4, quarter to 4, he would show up. I remember hearing something very interesting, but Mishuma, I don't think that it's Mefursim. And he told us that he had heard this on a Yechidus which he had with the Rebbe that given year when it was the sale. It was right before Pesach or Chalamoid Pesach. It was Pesach. And he complained to the Rebbe that his son Heshi is into a stamp collection, and the Kop licked them in his stamp collection, and he's not up to his studies doing well in day school where he went to in yeshiva in Chicago. And that uns erzählt that the Rebbe told him that he should not interfere with his son's stamp collection. And the Rebbe tells him, ich gehad a stamp collection. Und als ich bin weggefahren von Stub, when the Rebbe left his parents, hab ich das übergelassen. I left it there. And my mother told me later that they sold the stamps, the Rebbe's parents sold the stamps, And they had to live from this money for 6 months, from the money of the stamps. I heard it from him. I was a young child, a young kid, but I remember hearing it authentically, and he heard it from the Rebbe. It was either that very same day or a day before, or 2 days before, but it wasn't much. It wasn't a psa. This was the Mocker. The Rebbe told it to him, and I heard it from him a few days later. I think I have to share some time with my Chaverim, so.
Rabbi Katz.